All right, let's talk about what it would take to go from 600 to 800. And before I start, I'd just like to say the advice I'm going to give here is designed for the ChessDojo training program, but everything I say you can do on your own. The ChessDojo program is just a way to facilitate what I'm doing here with a group and with a structure to hold yourself accountable to. Okay, so the first things we got to discuss is the rating. What does that mean, 600 to 800? We have constructed this rating system so that we can translate ratings across different organizations. Okay, and 600, 800 is kind of an interesting group because what it actually means is you are now above average. And so a very interesting stat is if you go chess.com rapid, around 750 is the average rating of the millions of people who have played on chess.com. And you imagine this is everybody who has logged on at some point and maybe they barely knew the rules, but nevertheless, they were on there and the average of all of the players there is around 750. So at this third step, you are already beyond average. And just when I consider average, think about any kind of physical activity I've done in my life, and I've never really been much above average at anything. So already, you should say to yourself at 600 to 800 that you're already coming into the higher levels of the game, even if it might not seem like that at first. Okay, so let's look at some of the requirements that we feel you would need to fulfill in order to move up. So what we're looking at here is the cohort for the 600 to 800 rated group. And we're going to focus on Primal Potato for a second because we're going to look at one of his games as an example of the good and the bad about the 600 to 800 group. And I really want to stress what you're going to see in his game that we're going to look at. He's definitely stronger than the group below us. And you can definitely see the example if you want to look at the previous video from 400 to 600. Okay, so let's get into it. And one of the first things I want to observe is this Polgar mate in 1s and Polgar mate in 2s. So the Polgar mate in 1s, of course, is what the previous two groups also had to do. But now that we're moving up, we're getting the mate in 2s. Okay, and something I want to stress with the mate in 2s is I get a lot of pushback. I've been teaching chess for a long time, and I always get pushback with the mate in 2s. So let me show you a position, actually. This is an example of a typical mate in 2 that you're going to have to do at this level. And the pushback always happens that after a while, people find it hard, and then they cry out to me and they say, Jesse, this is garbage, buddy. I can find a way to mate this person. I don't have to do it like this. And there's a couple things that you're learning by doing this mate in 2 and all the others. You are learning basically the layups of chess, how to mate. And that is a skill that will carry on far beyond this particular rating band. You're also beginning to see square visualization. And that's very important when we think about still the most necessary skill of this level, which is material, not giving up stuff, right? 3 dimensions of the game: material, time, tempo, and quality of position. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but right now I'm going to say the most important skill still for this rating level is not giving away stuff for free. And when you start to see, for example, just immediately which squares the knight controls, that will help you immensely. All right, let's just do this one example actually as a mate in 2. And the answer is king f2. And then if king h2, we'll take the knight mate. And if pawn h2, this is where the visualization happens. You have to see that, oh, right, the pawn's going to move and then I get that square, right? Mate. Typical mate in 2, and notice there were 2 patterns involved in solving that puzzle. Later, you'll see that there's more patterns just in one problem, and that's the beauty of these things, is that you're going to have to marshal the mating patterns. And again, it's not just about the mating patterns, that's very important. It's also about visualization. Like here, you have to visualize that the G2 square is going to become available. All right, let's go back to this beautiful scoreboard and think about some of the other requirements that a guy like Primal Potato is going to do. Now, one thing I want to stress, mate in 2s, we've been doing the ChessDojo training program for a month, and so far very few people have finished the mate in 2s. This is the first chess workbook, FCW, by Peter Giannatos. You can see first in 0 to 400, there's part 1, then there was part 2, and now there's 3 parts that you have to do. What is it about? It's about taking stuff and holding on to your stuff, the material aspect of the game. Then we have the Puzzle Rush Survival and Puzzle Rush 5-Minute. These will teach you the basic tactics of the game, and as we're going to see in Primal Potato's game, he is of a different level with some tactical skills going on than we saw in the rating bands below. Then endgames. Here we are learning we have to do mate with a rook. The mate with the queen is still entirely essential at this stage of your development. The key strategy is still to be a miser, to take the material, not give anything away, trade everything down, and then mate with a queen, or in this case, sometimes a rook. And it's very important to learn these basic skills. Then we got a classic game list, some games a game to memorize, the opening principles video, game analysis, and there we go, more game analysis than the last time. And we're encouraging people with this check mark to do a post-mortem. Whether you're online or at a real event, we want you to talk to your opponent to get a sense of what they were thinking during the game. So let's talk about this journey between 600 and 800 using Primal Potato's game. And one of the things that I really like about what he says right away is basically my first longer game ever. And what I want to stress about that is very common in my experience of the last couple of years, that you have several people coming to the game for the first time and they've never really played a longer game. And credit to us, we have encouraged the likes of Primal Potato to play longer games. And so, as with the earlier groups, 0 to 400, 400 to 600, and now 600 to 800, the 2 major features of this player's growth is going to be learning to be stingy, not giving away stuff, and then also learning to slow down. And that process of slowing down and then looking at the game like Primal Potato did is the key for growth. Now, C5, and notice that he is thinking already a lot about the openings. He's got names like Smith-Morra Gambit. And I want to stress, we are still not at the point where you should be thinking about openings. That will come, but not yet. Now at this rating level, this is not the moment to be thinking about openings. And what I can promise you is that if you just play principled opening moves, you will play much stronger moves than you would if you would be studying opening theory, because the principles will guide you in a much clearer way than fancy names like Smith-Morra Gambit. Okay, trust me, trust me on that. So, no idea what's happening? Fine. Good move, right? D4, fine. Queen A5, weird. And now he gives some analysis, which I really like, about should I have played D5 and what was that all about. And I think one of the things that we could say later that really could come into the discussion about D5 is not just a bunch of variations, but like, what are we trying to do? And what we say, I think, is we're dislocating the knight from its central field. We are essentially undeveloping the knight. right, by playing d5. However, his move is also fine. He's done nothing wrong, and I love this move too, gaining a tempo. Now, here there's an interesting question about should he have given up a tempo to play rook b1? Could he have done something more fancy? Now, maybe he could have, but what I like about what he does with rook b1 is we're just holding on to our stuff. Again, that is the most important thing at this stage in the development. We are developing, very good. We are castling, very good. And now here's an example, I think, of the difference between somebody who is 600 to 800 and somebody 0 to 400 is a very nice trick here with knight d5. And it's not just maybe he did it just as a trick, but it's also a good move in itself. The knight is going to a more active square. And what is the point? Well, if we take this thing, pop, knight c7. And those are the kinds of tactics that things like Puzzle Rush and going over your own games will help you see patterns that come about. And a lot of it might seem like a small trick, but that is the edge which will differentiate a 4 to 600 and a 600 to 800. And it's ultimately about material, being able to control that material dimension of the game. All right, and notice black sees it, doesn't fall for it. And he goes back, very good. Queen e2, development, very nice. Knight d4, we could criticize this move, but for the moment we're not, because it's not giving up any material. Okay, fancy. And I like this next move. Notice that one of the things actually I really like he doesn't worry about his doubled pawns. He's concerned about getting everything open. And then terrible move. So, at this level, people will be giving away stuff. And that giving away of stuff will be what decides the game. So, of course, here he should recapture the bishop, and he doesn't. And you might say, oh, primal potato, that guy got lucky because his opponent didn't recapture the bishop. No, at this level, that is not luck. That is what will happen. I've been teaching chess long enough to know that that is simply what happens here. Okay, good. 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 And now, this is a mistake because we are just giving away a pawn for free. Now, this position, let's say something obvious. White is completely winning. He can take on d6 with the pawn, the rook. Even if it were black's move, he would be completely winning. And he's still winning after a3, but we're going to see that he loses the thread here in the next couple of moves. The biggest thing is giving away material. And then nice move, and we have a double attack on the bishop, and the bishop on a4, and the rook on b7. And I want to stress, at this level, the double attack, hitting the loose pieces, that is where the games are very often decided. Now, one of the nice things about what he does here is he bails out, and I think the most correct way. Rook takes b4. Now the game has become a little complicated. Okay, now it gets a little weird. Should we play rook d1? Should we play knight e1? We're a little bit on our back foot, but white is still winning. Pop, and then all of a sudden we're in trouble. So f4 was not the correct move, and we're about to see why. And what's going to happen? Black will get a double attack. Queen c1, exclam. What is the double attack? We're now hitting the pawn on f4 and the knight. And all of a sudden we got to say that black has gone from completely losing to now very much in the game. King f1, check to the miserable king. Queen h2, very good. And this next mistake, I want us to just consider for a second and say that it's important to see the psychological nature of the mistake. He's lost control of the game, Primal Potato has, and now he doesn't know what to do, so he goes crazy with rook takes e6. A horrendous move, And one of the things that's interesting to me about looking at this game is it's very important in chess not to be driven by fear or ghosts. And we're going to see black has a ghost. He thinks that, oh no, if I take that rook, the bishop will be opened up onto the king. And we might now, condescend him and say, oh, buddy, you should have seen that you take the rook. Not only is it no big deal, but the black rook will then be looking at the white queen, the black rook on f8. But I want to stress that even in my games and games of players higher than me, fear plays a role. And a lot of times we don't do things simply because we're terrified, say, in this case, of the bishop on b3. And it's therefore, a learning moment for myself to say, oh, well, everybody does this. And people need to learn how to control their fears, right? Easier said than done, but important, especially when calculating and mastering this dimension. Taking stuff and not giving away stuff. All right, black basically believes white and does this, and then does this, and then all of a sudden the game switches. Now white is fully in control, and white goes on to win fairly convincingly now. Starts pushing the pawn. Past pawns must be pushed. And black resigns. Now, this ending is how a lot of the games at this level will end, with somebody having an incredible amount of material. One thing I will say is, at this juncture, it's okay if you play on. At my level, if you play on here in this position as black, somebody's going to yell at you, and rightly so. But here, white still doesn't necessarily know how to mate, right? And what is the danger? Well, stalemate. Stalemate is the danger. That is one of the reasons why we really stress the need to say mate with the queen correctly, because when you start learning how to mate with the queen, stalemate is very often something that happens. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there, and I want to just finish by saying again that the advice I gave here from going to 600 to 800, that is the path from going from the average rating, basically, to beyond that. So you're already beyond the average, and that means you're starting to get people with a little skill, like we saw with the knight d5 trick. You're starting to get people who can do that kind of thing. But at the same time, we're still dealing with the two fundamental problems that we have seen in 0 to 400 and 400 to 600, namely mastering the dimension of material. Chess is a three-dimensional game. Material, time, and quality of position. At this level, you will get inklings of what time and quality of position might mean, but for the moment, you should mostly forget about it and focus on the dimension of material. Be a miser, a stingy, stingy miser. Gain material, trade it all off, and then learn how to mate at the very end. That will get you up to 1,000 and beyond, right? So that's number one. And number two, slower. This was Primal Potato's first slow game. And I gotta stress, especially now, this current stage in world chess, there are millions of people out there who have been playing a lot of blitz chess and haven't given their mind the opportunity to go deeper. And without going deeper, there's so many things that they haven't explored in chess. And even if you wanted just to be a good blitz player, you need to think deeply first before stuff will then come quickly to you. Okay, till next time, bye.